Mayan, 15, Aztec. So, hope you're all doing well this evening, and we're going to have a fascinating lecture as well as readings and a meditation later on. So, this will be a little bit of a different subject matter that maybe most of you have ever heard about before, at least in a Facebook Live event. I decided to do this because I received, let's say, inspiration from watching something fairly recently on this. And it was very impressive to me, and it startled me also. And also, as well, when I was in university, I have a degree in art history. And one semester, I was choosing different classes to fill up that particular semester, and I was going into the art history classes to see what I would be taking for that, I think, fall semester. I was looking through some of the choices, and a lot of them just didn't seem to interest me. Others I had already taken before. Then I saw a class on Mesoamerican art, and I do believe it was new. So when I saw that, I said, oh, that's different. That's something interesting. I had some idea about Mesoamerican history and its culture from watching television, from school in the past also, and touching upon some of its spirits as well when one is doing this type of work. One, tends to learn from different aspects and different cultures, different religions, different spiritualities from different places in the world. So I saw that particular subject. I said, that's something different. And apparently it's kind of new. They haven't really taught it too much before. So there's no other class that I'm interested in. So I decided to let me just take this class and see what it's about. And it turned out to be one of the better things I'd ever done in school because it was different. There was a good amount of students there. Not as many as other classes because this was kind of a new subject for them. But there was enough people there. The teacher was very knowledgeable, had a lot of experience, with this particular subject matter. So she wasn't somebody who was just learning from a textbook, for a few months or a few weeks and just putting a class together. She had a genuine interest in the material and in the subject matter, and she had been to Mesoamerica, to look at these ancient structures, ancient artifacts, artworks, and really concentrated a study, on that for herself. So she was a hands-on lecturer regarding this particular area of art and history. So it opened my mind and my spirituality to a whole new civilization and a whole new culture that I really did not know that much about prior. So it was incredible to see what these people have accomplished, what their belief systems were, what their art, was like, so closely related to their religion and their spirituality. And it enhanced, my knowledge in many different areas. So it was a wonderful experience, and I'm so grateful that I did, take this class and learn, from that, and was able to incorporate that knowledge into my coursework, into my degree, for ancient, or actually for art history. So that worked out very, very beautifully. So let's see. I can see that there are several people joining us already. Good evening, Valerie. Good evening, Tracy. And good. I'm glad that you can all understand me and see me. Perfect. So we're right on target. Well, I did a brief commercial beforehand just to say hello, introduce us here for this particular program, and then came out just to do that brief announcement commercial. Waited a few minutes for the system to settle, and then here we are. Once again, as usual, every Friday evening. So this has worked out very, very well. So, getting right into the subject matter. So I just gave you an introduction of how I was introduced, to this particular subject matter, which mainly came from art and its history. But as always, I like to know more about other areas of ancient civilizations and peoples. So I immediately looked more into the spiritual aspect, of this. And fortunately for the ancient Mesoamericans, their art is very closely identified and works tightly with their religious practices and their belief systems. Ancient peoples had a strong connection with the spirits and with the belief of their gods, goddesses, and deities. And such is the case with the Mesoamericans, and there are several groups of people that fall into this category. Many of you may be familiar with some of these cultures, such as the Olmecs, the Toltecs, the Maya, and this evening's subject matter, which is the Aztec. And there were several other factions and other tribes, as they were known back then, also that lived in that Mesoamerican section of the world, which covered part of southern Mexico, or let's say mid to southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, the Mexican coasts of the Atlantic, which would be the now known as the Yucatan and the Cancun areas, also the Pacific regions, as well. So that covers again more of southern Mexico towards the Pacific, region, Costa Rica, also. So parts of Panama to a small extent. So it was really Middle America where these civilizations, flourished. And they go back in time to the 1300s from what history has been able to record and from what scientists, scholars, researchers have been able to find out. So the Mesoamerican period started to develop more in like 1325. So this is the 14th century AD. So thus they are old and may go even further back as more and more discoveries are being found out. And now we have more sophisticated forms of technologies that are helping with those discoveries. And so a lot of these ancient peoples, going from Mesoamerica, from even Upper Mexico, down, to South America, because we also have to count as well on the Inca civilization and those of Peru and South America, Chile, as well, which has its ancient peoples, in addition to the Mesoamericans. So those go far back as well, down to that period. So we're talking about what? Several hundreds of years ago, 1,000 years ago or so, and even more from those people. So we're not going to cover too much about pre-Columbian history because this is not what this discussion is about this evening. We're going to talk more about the spiritual side, of the pre-Columbian peoples, what they believed in, how they believed in, and how that led to their civilization growing and flourishing. This is one part aspect of it, because there are the other, as well, with their culture, their education, their incredible architectural feats, also their government, which was quite advanced, for that time period. And, it all works together. It's a component, of things that make a society. But for the discussions here, for metaphysical purposes, we'll be focusing on their spirits and their spirituality and how they practiced and what they believed and how, unfortunately, that was part of their destruction, as well, because that was a strong influence along with other, areas too that came into play. And we'll be touching upon that too because we cannot ignore the other areas of their demise, which partly had to do with their military stance and views on things. These were tribal people, even though they were very advanced and very well educated in many areas, but they were also very primal also. And part of that led to their demise, also. As well as the Spanish that came in later on in the 16th century and really, accelerated the ending of the Aztec, people and the other pre-Columbian peoples, also. The people from the New World or from the old world came in with their beliefs, with their knowing, with their agenda, which caused, a great deal of the destruction, of the Aztec and pre-Columbian peoples. So we will have to discuss about that because it's extremely important. It plays into the spiritual role, of the Aztec civilizations, too. So we'll wait here a bit to see who else is joining us this evening. And hello, Pietro, how are you? And so we'll go a little bit into the beginnings of this amazing and fascinating culture. So as I touched upon before, the Aztec people, the pre-Columbian people, descended from the northern areas of Mexico, as far as scholars and researchers have been able to discover. This could be actually even higher in North America, as I have studied and recall from university also, that the true beginnings of these individuals is not really known exactly where they came from. So it could be the northern areas of Mexico, but it could be much higher into North America. So we're already talking about places such as Arizona, New Mexico, parts of California, Utah, the Southwest, perhaps even Texas or so. I recall that some people were saying something about Utah as being perhaps a spiritual center for the original peoples, which kind of makes sense as I have learned later on, because Utah seems to be a state at this time now, but at that place a territory or a land where a lot of spiritual events and activities occurred, and a lot of very strong spiritual people that we now know as part of the Native American culture also used to live and came from and had incredible belief systems there, as we have seen now through studying ancient artists of the Americas, and particularly North America, that those people lived for hundreds of years ago. Many different of the tribes, which we now know as the Native American people here, and they left history there from the past, from ruins of the villages that used to exist in such places, their artwork also, as which depicts a lot of their culture, the way those people lived, where they came from, how they existed. So through part scholarly work, part conjecture, we see that these people start to migrate southward, beyond the borders of North American territory, and headed south to what we now know as Mexico and the rest of Mesoamerica. And there were changes, alterations along the way with them. So it is believed that these people came from the northern territories, from the southern part of the United States, and they migrated down to the Mexican region. And they began to set up different, cultures, different societies. There was not just the Aztec alone, especially more towards the Mexican portion of things. When we talk about people such as the Olmecs, the Toltecs, they were further down south from the Mexican region. So we're talking about people from the Guatemala, from Honduras, Nicaragua, countries. So they were Belize. They were more, in that section of Mesoamerica. But for them, Mexico was more upper, so that's northern, air territory. So there we see more of the Aztec people. And the Aztecs were actually an empire. But the Aztec people were actually known as 3 different tribes. So they were the Mexica, the Zapotec, and the Tatlans. So those were the 3 tribal people that started to exist in that Mexican basin, the Mexican Valley, region. They all together were known as the Aztec nation. But individually they had their own separate identities and names. So the people that are mostly associated with Aztec would be the Mexica society. So those are the ones where we get the incredible temples from. The Temple Mayor, for instance, the temple of the sun, the temple of the moon. That fell more under the auspices of the Mexica people. The Zapotecs were also very powerful. The Tatlacans were also very powerful as well, but the Mexica just became stronger. They built a stronger society, a stronger structure. So they were able to do a lot of incredible things. Hello, Kathy, how are you? And they were able to build a strong, society, a strong structure in regards to agriculture, to their sciences, to their architectural wonders and engineering, the layout of their cities. Also, at that time, their grand city was known as Tenochtitlan. And I'll tell a little bit about that because that plays a lot into religion, as well. So Tenochtitlan was the main capital of the Mexica Aztec Empire. And they grew in might with their armies, their military, and they basically were the leaders of the Aztec nation. The Aztec nation began, as I said, around the year 1325 and came to its conclusion about a good 200 or so years later, 250 years or so later. So they did accomplish a lot in all that time. And again, we had the other societies that lived in the region as well, who were actually older, such as the Olmec, people, for instance, who were there much longer before the Aztec nation ever appeared. And to a grand degree, the Aztecs took a lot from the Olmec people. They knew of them, already. They learned from the Olmecs. There was information, culture that was there at their disposal. So they took on a lot of what the Olmecs had set up and what they learned from their civilization. They incorporated a lot of their religions, practices, and the gods of the Olmecs into the Aztec belief system. So some of them were blended with the gods that already existed for the Aztecs. Others were incorporated, into their beliefs, also. So they built a grand pantheon of gods that they worshipped tremendously. And they were a very spiritual people, the Aztec nation. They really didn't seem to make a move without consulting or praying and giving devotion to their deities. So from there, we had a civilization that flourished tremendously. The Aztec people, the Mexica people themselves, were the last group to arrive in the Mesoamerican territories. Prior to that, the Zapotecs had come, the Tatlacans had come, there were some other factions that came in as well prior to that. So they took over the best lands, that were available and set up their cities, their nations there. The Mexica were among the last to arrive. So at that point, what was considered the premium land was no longer available, for them. However, they made an agreement with one of the leading, societies there at that time period, to take some land or so that was left over, so they could build at that point, their villages and set up, their society. So they worked out some agreements or so, and they were able to do that. These people believed a lot in diplomacy, and they did, have a system, and they worked out diplomatically things, and they signed, the contracts in their version or so. They had their currency, which was actually in the form of maize, which we could know as corn, and agricultural goods and things of that nature. And that was their currency. So they set on a plot of land which was actually an island that was left over there, kind of like a marshland, area. But the Mexica, they were very ingenious and innovative also, and they were able to build upon that massive island that they had. And they were able to build irrigation systems, precincts, structures that held up in the lands. They built up the island to make it more, in several areas, more firm and stronger for them to actually exist. And they built their incredible structures, there. So besides the temples, or so, they built their homes, their other structures there very solidly. And they were able to create the city capital of Tenochtitlan, from that, which was quite an incredible marvel and an incredible achievement of engineering, architecture, and art. It was absolutely astounding what they were able to do. So they were quite brilliant in those areas. So they built their capital city. They became stronger because of their military prowess and the way they were able to put things together. They were also able to design their armies in a tremendous way. Other satellite villages also joined, in with the Mexica tribe because they saw that they were stronger, they were mighty when it came to fighting and their conquests. And one area of Mesoamerican people was that they did, war with one another. That is how they were able to acquire and dominate, other smaller tribes and states and gain goods, from them and gain power and control. So with the blending of some of the other smaller societies, they were able to build, their civilization, their people, there. From numbers that are estimated, they had at least well over 200,000 people living in Tenochtitlan as part of the Aztec Mexica Empire. So it was quite impressive. 200,000 people going back to the 14th century was a tremendous metropolis with a tremendous amount of citizens, especially for an ancient, country. So they were able to build and they were able to worship their gods and their religion in that way. So they were brilliant when it came to those certain areas of things. As I said also, their educational system was quite sophisticated, in some ways even more advanced than ours, today. So they had the Aztec calendar system that many of you may have heard about. Perhaps some of you know. They had a number system or alphabet system to the count of 20. Also, they had weights and measures as well. They were excellent with mathematics and also with astronomy because they believed strongly, in the heavens, and they were able to do astronomical observations of the stars and the planets, and they were able to build part of their spirituality and belief systems on that fact of astronomy, on the planets, and their belief that the gods and goddesses resided in the upper heavens, in the upper realms, which was part of outer space. And they also believed, as we've discovered more and more, that they had been visited, from others, from other worlds, from other planets, that came down to be of beneficence for them. A lot of those deities were considered gods, to them. And those gods came down to teach them, to educate those people. And it is speculated strongly that what they learned and how to create these villages, these societies, these tremendous cities, was taught by these benevolent beings that came from other worlds. And after a certain amount of time, they left, which seems to be the running theme for ancient, civilizations. Beings from other worlds, and not just from Mesoamerica, but from other parts of the world, also have similar belief systems, similar mythologies, also, where thousands or hundreds of years ago, these beings descended from this incredible craft of fire, craft of flame, metallic beings that glistened, and they came upon the peoples that were here, and they helped them to advance. They civilized them. They even evolved, these people, those that were on Earth at the time, to become more advanced, to become more evolved, to become more educated, and taught them how to build these things, how to create, all these various wonders that we now have, that are left over from the past. And then after a while, they left. But another running theme for all of these mythologies and all of these religions and spirituality systems is that the majority of them said to the people here, we have left, but we will return. They didn't specifically say when, but they said that they will return. And that has always been part of the spiritual systems of ancient civilizations. And let's see, I'm looking at the wall here. We have several people commenting. And yes. Mm-hmm. 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 Yes, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, very true. Very true, Pietro. Exactly. This is akin to the Roman civilizations and all those people from before, the Egyptians, the Sumerians as well. We have a lot of commonalities, here with those peoples and their belief systems and what they've left behind, for us to learn from as well. And again, this is all a lot of prehistory. These are the pre-Columbian people in the case of Mesoamerica. The Romans, of course, are European as well, which is far older civilizations. The Greeks, the Sumerians, also the ancient Near East, which go back even further as well. And those people left, similar stories about others from other places, other worlds that came to assist, to evolve the people that were here at the time. And then they left in different areas, in different forms or whatever, but they also stated that they will be back. Who knows what the timing is for these beings, because they are far more advanced than we are, even still at this time. For them, 1,000, 3,000, 5,000 years may be just, a blink of an eye. But it is expected that those from before will come back again. And as in the case of the Aztec civilization and empire, they had tremendous belief in their spirits, in their gods, and that they would not make a move without consulting, their gods, offering prayers and sacrifices as well. One strong association with these ancient belief systems of the Aztecs in particular was their belief in sacrifice. Human sacrifice, animal sacrifice was very much a very strong dominant force in their religious practices and beliefs. And it really came from the ancient gods themselves, as it was from back in the past with the ancient ones of the Mesoamerican cultures. They stated that they came to Mesoamerica from a society, a city, their original ancestral home, which was called Azatlan. Azatlan was in the northern territories, and they descended below. The reasons why were not too clear. I don't believe that there's still anything explained as to why they left Aztlan. But they did depart, and they had to move down towards Middle America and start over and create their newest civilizations. But that's the origin story, of the ancient Meso, peoples. It is interesting also because Azatlan, which is spelled Aztlan, has a derivative from a people from long, long ago. So we can relate as the word or the term Azatlan or Aztlan to the ancient civilization of Atlantis. As we can see the similarities there, in the wording. And it is believed that perhaps these people from Mesoamerica or so are derived from the ancient Atlantean race. After Atlantis was destroyed, and we're talking about a civilization that was like over 12,000 years ago. So they were ancient even to the Aztec people, but they knew of them. And there was a belief that these people are from the Atlanteans that resided in their continent, somewhere in the Atlantic, closer towards more to Africa and to Europe. But it was a vast civilization. It was an island nation, as we know, sank after the great catastrophe. But not everyone perished, and many, went to different places. Some went to Africa, some went to Europe. We know that Some migrated to the Canary Islands, to the Cape Verde Islands, to the coast of Spain, Portugal, Malta, which is the very beginnings, of Europe and the Mediterranean. They went to perhaps to the Spanish areas and to Basque region, which is a small country also that's located within Spain. Those people are not Spanish, however. They are very different. Their DNA structure and their bloodlines are completely different, from the Spanish. And their language, Basque, has no relation to Latin language whatsoever. They are their own language and their own people. And it has been speculated for many years that the Basque people were descendant of the Atlantean race. Others migrated more south, and we can then say that they went to the Yucatan, Cancun regions, and spread out from there throughout Mesoamerica, South America, and perhaps even North America. So we may have some native peoples here in North America that could well be descendants of the Atlantean race. The Atlanteans were known as the Golden People, the Red Race. And as we've seen and has been known with the Indian, the Native Americans of Middle America, North America, South America, they are known as the Red People. So there's a lot that works well and blends there together very, very well, with so long ago with the Atlantean nation. Again, Atlantis was so long ago and buried under the sea, there's really very little, if anything, left that could record their history, except for a few pieces of artifacts, some histories, and a lot of metaphysical and spiritual beliefs, and stories and mythologies that have been handed down through the centuries, even down to ancient Egypt, where it is believed that many of those people migrated to as well, even before the Egyptian empire started to flourish, also through Africa. So, there's a lot of tie-ins here. Coming back to the Aztec people, however, they descended from Azatlan and came downward. And they brought a lot of their beliefs, their culture, and their knowledge from that original country, to the new place, to their new world. And they built upon it. Among that was their spirits and their religions. And they had some very powerful beliefs and some very powerful gods that they believed and prayed to as well. We're not going to go into a big history because there's several of them. They have quite an extensive pantheon going on with their belief gods or so, but we will mention some of the principal people that will play very heavily here. For instance, in the Aztec nation, the Mexica people in particular, there were two main deities that they prayed to. They were the patron gods of their civilization, which was the god Tlaloc, which was known as the god of weather, thunder, lightning, and rain, especially. That was a god of agriculture, for them. They relied heavily, on the earth, on sustenance, on farming, agriculture, to build and maintain their society. So Tlaloc was the most important deity for them to believe in and to pray to. As well, they also believed strongly in military might and acquiring, territory, nations, subjugating others under their foot. So for that, they had their other principal god, Huitzilopochtli. Huitzilopochtli was the god of war, the god of strength, the god of dominion. Those are their two principal deities that help maintain their society. The Aztec built the legendary Temple Mayor right at the heart of Tenochtitlan. Here's where they prayed, to their gods, regularly. And they built this tremendous pyramid that rivals that of the ancient pyramids of Egypt. And at the very top of that pyramid, they had two smaller temples placed there. One was dedicated to Tlaloc, the other was dedicated to Huitzilopochtli. The language of the Aztec was derived from the Nahua, which is again from where they descended from, the Nahua people, the Nahua language, also known as Nahuatl. So a lot of their words, a lot of their language, comes, from the Nawa extraction. So they held these tremendous ceremonies to these gods and goddesses that they had. There's certainly more than just Tlaloc and Huitzilopochtli. They also prayed strongly to their goddess Coatlicue. Coatlicue in Nahuatl is known as jade skirt or jade serpent, a skirt. Again, the Aztec people believed heavily in the earth. They were very terrestrial, people. They they were very people of the earth. They lived from the earth. They prayed, to the earth. So things like agriculture, weather were extremely important to them. They lived because they had to survive by those conditions. They built their civilizations upon that. And they built the clay, the earth, extremely important to them. They were very devoted, to the planet and to taking care, of the world and nature. They had a reverence for the animals, the jaguar, the hummingbird, the toucan, you know, cats, even dogs that they may have had there or so, as well. They had a reverence for their animals because it was part of their sustenance, also. So they had a strong connection with turtles, frogs, amphibians, because that was found mainly in that territory. So, of course, that was part of their sustenance, but also part of their belief systems, and part of what they made their military gear, their jewelry for adornments, the parrots, those incredible feathers that used to use and wear for their ceremonies, but as well as for their military. They were quite lavish, with their costumes and with their army or their military attire, which had a lot to do with using things from the earth. The tree bark, for instance, or so, turtle shells as well, their spears, also the gems and jewels that were found in the areas, also obsidian, jade, for instance, quartz. They were wealthy in those areas there, and they used those gems and those crystals also for adornment, for jewelry, but also for their rituals, their religions, as well as for their military. For instance, their spears of obsidian were the sharpest in the world. That is how they hunted, that is how they fought to maintain control over the Aztec Empire. So they had a strong reverence, for the earth and what the earth provided and gave to them. That was all linked to their spirits and to their gods and goddesses. Goddess Coatlicue, jade skirt. They pray for abundance and, for survival. So she was another principal goddess, of these people here. They also had, and again, their language is a little bit impressive and not the easiest to pronounce. So please forgive me if I mispronounce anything, here. But another principal god also for them was Tlaxtlapochtli, which was also known as Zipetotec. Zipetotec was our Lord the Flayed One. And these people believed a great deal, as I said, in sacrifice, in flaying, people and animals for their religious and spiritual practices also. And Zipetotec was also one of those gods, a god of agriculture as well, the god of spring, sprouting, and fertility. We had also the Tlaloc gods as well, the Aticahualo, which was fertility and sowing. We had also, and they fell in different pantheons. For instance, Tlaloc was the principal god, but there were the Tlaloc gods as well, that were his service, gods that worked under the god Tlaloc as well. So they have 4 different factions of gods that they believed in. Here, the gods of weather, of course, the gods of agriculture, the gods of fertility, the gods of sacrifice, which practically all of them were sacrificed to because that was their belief. And I'm looking for the more principal gods here because they have several. I'm really calling upon the more important ones, their principal gods that they prayed to regularly. I had the greatest reverence, for. Let me see. They had their gods of maize, for instance, which was corn, which was such a principal staple food which they made so many different things out of as well. And so they were quite impressive and quite interesting. So Huitzilopochtli, which was, of course, the god of war, of dominance, but also of giving of the flowers as well, and there was a festival. And there were festivals devoted to these gods, also, that they practiced on a monthly basis. So not every god was worshipped every month, but several of the gods had different months dedicated to them. So once a month they had these tremendous rituals there, usually in the evenings, in front of the Templo Mayor. I'll go into that a little bit more in a moment. And a lot occurred there, as well. So for those hundreds of years, this is the way their civilization flourished and lived and existed. And I'm looking to see who else is a principal deity for you to know about. Here, I do believe I mentioned the four most important, which were the ones that had the greatest significance, for them. Once a month they held these tremendous rituals, so it was an impressive and a spectacular sight to behold, because the entire empire basically would come together, for these festivals, for these rituals. Some were more grander than others. Some were held annually. There is one ritual and festival that was held once every 52 years, because that would be the changeover, of the society and the evolutionary, period. That was a tremendous, tremendous ritual and festival that they would hold, and all of the Aztec Empire would be involved, in this. So when we say that they had rituals, that the strong beliefs, they would certainly light up, the night with their torches, with fire, with, incredible rituals. They had the plaza in front of the Templo Mayor, known as the Temple or the Plaza of the Eagle, where their priests and priestesses, but mainly their priests, Tatloani as they were called, would come to recite rituals, to give prayers, offerings, food, animals, and humans, as well. So at times there was human sacrifice, which is a very strong practice that they believed in heavily. The reason why they did human sacrifice was because hundreds of years before, their gods came to this land, came to the world, and the gods sacrificed themselves to create, part of the world and part of their nation and their agriculture. And the gods gave of themselves so that the Aztec Empire, the Mesoamerican peoples, could live and could flourish and could grow, their society, their world, and make it be so. The Aztecs believed heavily and revered their gods, where they said, we sacrifice our people because the gods sacrificed themselves for us to be here. Therefore, in gratitude, and basically in giving back, they sacrificed themselves in return, as a way of gratitude and expressing devotion to them. So, human sacrifice was a very strong part of their spirituality. They believed that if they did not give through the human sacrifice, their civilization, their world would crumble, would cease to exist. They believed this so strongly that they did this practically on a monthly basis as part of their rituals and belief systems and cures. We had shamans there as well that utilized the herbs, the plants, the things of the earth for cures, for healing, as well, and for devotion. These tremendous rituals would have thousands of people attending. Remember what I said earlier. They had 200 or more thousand people in their civilization, just in the Mexica, Tenochtitlan area alone. They would sacrifice literally hundreds of people during these rituals. And depending on the importance or the significance of particular rituals, as incredible as this sounds, they could sacrifice thousands of people during these rituals. And the people were willingly giving themselves for sacrifice, for it was a belief and it was considered an honor to sacrifice oneself for your civilization and for your people. They believed this so strongly they would prepare people up to a year in rituals, education, whatever they needed to know in order to have this sacrifice be successful and in order for their peoples to continue and to evolve. So it was considered an honor to give yourself. How they did this was an incredibly, as we now would consider it, barbaric and gruesome way. But this was the way they were. So they would have these people walk up the Templo Mayor in this case, and there would be a pedestal there. There would be the Gratatloani, the great priests or priests that would be up there, right next to the temples of Tlaloc, Huitzilopochtli. They were the two principal gods that they sacrificed to. So they had this stage there, and they had this slab, they're laying there, so that the people would lay up themselves upon the slab. And they would perform their rituals with smoke, with incenses, with prayer, drums. The music would be reverberating all throughout the Templo Mayor. Thousands of people be praying, and chanting, throughout these rituals. And the sacrifice would lay himself upon the table, up there, and the Tatloani would have a dagger and would literally, just stab the person in their chest and open their chest and remove their heart and bring it up to the sky and bring that as devotion to the particular deity that they were praying to during that event. That was the offering to the god. That was the sacrifice to their god. That this person gave their life for you as you gave your life for us. We pray for the continuation and the blessings of our people through you. Once that was done, they would literally throw the body down the Templo Mayor, which must have been an impressive sight to see as well. At times, they would even dismember, the body while there, and they would just hurl the body, down the Templo Mayor to the very end. It was a very cruel, or seemingly cruel, not for us it's horrendous, for them it was just part of their religion, but it was barbaric and it was quite gruesome. Blood was everything for them as well. They believed strongly in blood. That was life, energy. The blood that would flow down would give power, to those, who remained, but also to the entire civilization, and it would provide nourishment, sustenance, and strength to the earth. These were some of the rituals that these people experienced at that time. In a major ceremony, it is recorded. A lot of this is recorded verbally. That's been passed down generation after generation. We're lucky that the Mesoamerican people, being as bright as they were and having their alphabet system, left this behind in codices. So they recorded these in books, in their artwork. They recorded a lot of their history in that way. So we're able to look upon a great deal of what they did and how they lived through their own written word. We are very fortunate to have that. Other ancient civilizations do not offer that to us. And researchers, scholars or so have to really take years and decades to learn and to decipher and to find clues as to how those ancient peoples existed during that time. In the case of the Mesoamericans and the Aztecs, we are fortunate and blessed that we do have a lot of written material that they left behind and that has been able to be deciphered and understood. So we know a great deal of how they lived and what they believed in and how they did certain things, in their society and in their city-state. So this is not through conjecture. This is not through scientists or doctors or whatever, or archaeologists, looking in and discovering and putting bits and pieces together. Some of it, yes, but a lot of it, fortunately, it is the written word from the Aztecs themselves. So we're getting it directly from the ancients. So this is what they did, this is what they believed. So they were a spiritual people, they were a metaphysical people, and they believed that by doing these things and blessing the earth, praying, for the agriculture, praying for healing, praying for the weather to be just right, praying to the stars to fall in the right configurations, would bring the sustenance that they needed to survive. Their magic also was incorporated strongly in this as well, and thus they received blessings from these, and they were able to survive and to grow for hundreds of years. So here we have it with these ancient people with these incredible belief systems, and they were able to survive and grow and became quite an incredible civilization and a legendary world that we still learn about and talk about today. They are part of Earth history, and they are a part of us, as well. We have learned from them. So we are very fortunate to know about them and their incredible beliefs, their education, how they studied their alphabet, their numerology, as well. They believe strongly in numerology, for instance, as well as astrology. So they had their own systems of the stars, not like we have it really today, but they believed in the constellations and how each planet moved and what it did for them, where the gods may have come from, how that instilled to them. They believed in numerology as well. They had the 9 levels of life system belief in there. So they had 9 levels of life, and they had 13 other levels that went beyond, also. So we have the number 9 playing here, the 9 lives, the 9 sections of life, which is still dominant in numerology systems. We have the numbers 1 through 9 working for us. We are all a number. We are all born under the auspices of a certain number ranging between 1 through 9. Each vibration tells us about our personality, our characteristics, depending on what year and where we are born and how we are born. We still carry numerology in that form, in that basic structure, till this day. And then we've expounded upon that, obviously. So they believed a lot in those systems, spiritually as well as academically, also. And we derive astrology and numerology to a certain part from them, and then from those before. Again, they were part of the New World. What I mean by that is from the Europeans, where this was part of the discovery. That is why people like Christopher Columbus, came to the New World, because North America, Middle America, South America was the New World. For them, the world only existed there in the European territories. Spain, England, of course, they were known differently at that time. The Roman Empire, etc., or so. Marco Polo, when he came from Italia, traveled all the way to the Orient, to Asia, to discover China, as well as the other discoverers that went, after, them too. So, during that time period, we're now moving 200 years later or so to the 1500s. At this point, Tenochtitlan is in its flower. At this point, we must not neglect also to go back a little bit before I move forward, that there was also the civilizations prior to the Aztecs as well, which was known as the ancient city, which was tremendously revered throughout all of Mesoamerica, of Teotihuacan, which is, of course, in Mexico. Also, there was another area. Teotihuacan was the descendant or the origin of what Tenochtitlan became. So the Aztec people knew about Teotihuacan already, and those people, though, were ancient people to them, even at that period, because Teotihuacan goes farther back. And there we have the Temple of the Sun, the Temple of the Moon. We have the Avenue of the Dead. We have, the Avenue of the Dead aligned with the jaguar statues that go down through there. So there's a lot of similarities to the way the ancient Egyptians designed their world and their cities throughout Cairo, Al-Qahira, the ancient city of Kemet. and further down, Aswan, and all of those city-states, Luxor, as we know the temple of Luxor, the temple of Karnak, and those city-states, Nubia, further down south, also, we go farther down into Africa, we go to the city of Aksum, as well in Ethiopia, which had their kings, their queens, their nobility, and their impressive engineering and architectural wonders there. And beyond in Africa, Timbuktu in Mali, which Timbuktu was the educational capital of Africa so long ago. We had learned people, such as we had learned people in Nubia, in Aksum, going further up to Egypt, to Kemet, Cairo, Alexandria. They all existed at that time. They were brilliant people. They have scholars, they have books, they have codices that still exist, there. These were all highly educated and advanced civilizations and people that existed thousands of years ago. So, we also had them in the New World. And where? But of course, in Mesoamerica. In the 1500s, in I do believe 1536 or so, Hernán Cortés, the conquistador from Spain, landed in Mesoamerica. And he was the first foreigner and those people to discover the Aztec nation, the Aztec people and the Mesoamericans. And that's where things changed. Because once we had these new culture and these new people coming about, they brought in their beliefs and their systems, and that's when things started to happen. So, when the Spaniards arrived, they ran into or learned about these people, discovered these people. At this point in Aztec Empire, in the Mexica region, the king was Montezuma. Many of you may remember Montezuma the First. His true name was actually Moctezuma. Montezuma is just a more glamorized name, for him. But his true name was Moctezuma the First. So Moctezuma, being the chieftain, the war king, there, heard about the strange and unusual people that were coming about on the lands. And he, along with his other, people there in his, cabinet or so, because they were ruled by others. It wasn't just Moctezuma alone. They were ruled by other people there, by what we would consider, priests, viziers, military people also, priests as well. The Tatloani, had a strong, culture there, and they were also revered and ruled, the people there too. Moctezuma was, of course, the principal king. So they all gathered and they all started to become, wary of these strangers, and they proceeded with caution. They did not just trust them immediately when they first arrived. Remember, these are very bright and insightful people. Moctezuma recalled that years before, at least I think a good 9 or 10 years before the Spaniards arrived, 1509, he received a prophecy from one of the Tatloani or so, that's saying that be wary in 10 years' time that there will be a group that will come and they will attempt to conquer our people. So Moctezuma was already pre-warned before the Spaniards came. So he was already wary and prepared, for this. So once they established more of a connection, and the Spaniards and Hernán Cortés started to connect with them more, and they, started to communicate more with one another, they received them well. So as I recall, when the Spaniards were taken to Tenochtitlan, and they first laid eyes upon the empire, they were absolutely agape. Honey, they could not believe what they were seeing. They had no idea that these people were so advanced and so civilized. When we're looking at the Mexica people, they dressed very much, almost in tribal gear and attire. They were not like the Spaniards who came in their uniforms, their costumes, their metal, their swords, their shields, their helmets, or so. These were people of the earth. They were primal, sophisticated, but still primal. So they just assumed these were a bunch of ignorant Indians or so until they arrived at Tenochtitlan and saw the wonders of this capital. They were in awe. They could not believe what they were seeing. And of course, they also learned about their tremendous wealth that the Aztec people had: the gold, the silver, the gems, the metals. These people were sophisticated, in those areas, also the jewelry, the artwork that was displayed, the architecture, the engineering wonders, the temples, the buildings, the structures, how these people lived. They had running water basically there, their canal systems. They were absolutely awestruck. And in some cases, they were more advanced than the Europeans, of the 16th century. So seeing upon these glories and these wonders, the Spaniards, had in their mind to conquer. And that's what they originally came for as well. They wanted to see what these lands could offer, and when they saw that these people were there and all this incredible wealth and all these incredible, wonders that they had, they wanted to seize it for themselves and claim it for Spain. So it did not take very much long, for them to do just that. So they assembled their military might. They had their ships or so, which the Mexica people did not really. And their relationship at first, which was kind of wary but somewhat friendly, Moctezuma and the people welcomed the Spaniards at the beginning, provided them with gifts as well of what they offered the Spaniards in return, but everyone was wary of one another. So prior to what has been taught in school or so, the Mexica were not these ignorant, savages that welcomed these people and said, oh yes, please, welcome, we adore you, you are gods to us. Yes, they did consider them godlike, that is for certain, because again, the Spaniards came with incredible artillery, metal, their clothing, their cannons, things that the Mexica had never seen before. They had no idea, they'd never known of such things. These were wonders to them. They had these advancements. They were able to communicate because there were some of the tribes that started to learn the language a bit. So there was one person who could speak Nahuatl and Spanish. So they were able to communicate and engage. So they were able to connect in some way, but they were plotting. The Spanish were plotting to take over. Moctezuma and the people were kind of weary already. There was some awareness. So they were getting themselves prepared, also. And soon enough, one day in August, about several months later or so, it did occur, where they captured Moctezuma and held him hostage. And they started, taking, from, and they started attacking the Aztec Empire and vice versa. And from there, it wasn't too long before the Spanish, overtook them and claimed everything for them. In the meantime, Moctezuma, was held hostage. He had lost his power because to those people, he had failed them. So he was more of a useless king to them. But nevertheless, he was held there. At one point, when the Spanish were being a bit overwhelmed by the Aztecs, they brought out and engaged with Moctezuma to try to negotiate with the people or so, and with the Spanish. Unfortunately, during that experience, it appeared that Moctezuma, from what is written or so, a rock was thrown and hit him in the head, and that killed him. Others say that his throat was cut. Either way, he was slain. That's when things really fell apart. And the Spanish, because they did have superior might, superior weaponry or so, were able to vanquish the Mesoamerican, the Aztecs, from there. And then gradually from there, they were able to take over more and more things. That was part of the demise, for these people. Because as advanced as they were with their education, with their engineering, architectural wonders or so, they had the people, they had thousands and hundreds of thousands of people there as well. They did have the military might to a certain extent, because even the Spanish were not counting upon well over almost over 200,000 people, being able ready to fight against them. They didn't have those numbers, but they did have the technology and they did have the weaponry. That was just too much for the Aztecs. The Aztecs failed because they didn't have the sophistication of weapons. They didn't have the sophistication of an army to put together, in a format that could, strategize and could overcome, the Spanish army. They didn't have that in their belief systems. Remember, they were more primitive. They were more warlike. They would just come in with their spears and their shields and whatever and just attack. And because of their superior numbers and because of, their ferociousness, they were able to overcome, the other tribes in the areas and build their nation. Here they did have none of that. So they were left behind in that area of things. They were, as it was said, they were a millennia or so more behind, in regards to their military strength and knowledge. That was part of their great defeat, unfortunately. Another thing that defeated these people were the fact of disease. When the Spaniards arrived from Europe, they had, their melodies that they carried with them, and they brought that into the New World. The Aztecs, the Mesoamericans, had no protection, had no biological protection against those diseases. Those things did not exist, in that area. So when those types of bacteria and disease affected them, it also wiped out a great deal of people because of the viruses and flu, in a way similar to what we are undergoing now here with the coronavirus. This is a new virus. There was no vaccines or things. There was no antibodies in their own systems to fight against this. Not that the coronavirus, we do have an antibody either, but it's a different time period and they're working on that. But we have methods and ways to treat, to overcome. Those people didn't have any of that. Their medicines were of the earth, and they were not as sophisticated in being able to combat these new diseases and these plagues that came upon them. It wiped out many in their civilization as well. That was part of their demise. And finally, the third element that was also responsible for their demise also was their belief system, their religion itself. They were tremendously devoted to their religion, to their gods. They sacrificed, they gave, they sacrificed so many people that unfortunately their numbers dwindled because of that in time. And even afterward, after the Aztecs or so, with the Maya people as well, they sacrificed as well too. It wasn't, as far as I'm aware, not to the same degree as the Aztec people, did. So the Mexica tribe was just tremendous with that. The Inca people sacrifice was not as much, as far as I am aware, also, as far as we know, too. The Maya sacrifice, but again, not to the same degree that the Aztec people did, because their rituals and their festivals were unbelievable. They were just spectacular. In one way, it was beyond. It was awe-inspiring, but it was also tremendously barbaric. The Spanish reported themselves that when they saw these belief systems and they saw the way these people practiced their rituals and this human sacrifice, they were absolutely horrified, by this, but what they saw and what they had to endure. They could not believe it, how barbaric these people were. Other tribes as well also, became aligned with the Spanish as well and fought against the Aztec to bring them down, too. So it wasn't just the Spanish alone. That's how they were able to get more of an army put together to vanquish the Aztec people, because other smaller tribes, lesser societies, banded together with the Spanish, because the taxation that the Aztec people practiced upon them was simply too great, was too high for them. It kept them menial, They were not able to overcome that. The Aztec were too powerful and extracted too much from them. So they had their political and currency systems in place. But all that system of grabbing and keeping these people low backfired against them eventually. And they joined together with the Spanish, and they were assisting in vanquishing these people. Also, they also could not tolerate anymore the amount of human sacrifice that was also forced upon them, because many of these people became slaves to the Aztecs as well. And for certain rituals, they sacrificed the slaves as part of their religion. So those people were kept in a smaller state of being, and they were not able to generate enough strength to fight back, either. So for those two main elements, those people joined the Spanish to vanquish the Aztec Empire as well. So the belief, their religion, their spirituality, which was so great, but when you are sacrificing 80,000 people in one ritual, which has been recorded at one point, and sometimes even more, they would sacrifice tens of thousands of people for a ritual in a matter of days. That is a tremendous amount of people that you are taking away from your population. You are diminishing your culture and your civilization because you are just too great in your belief and in your wanting to appease and wanting to continue. So this works on the element of pride, on the elements of greed, the deadly sins, two of the deadliest of the seven deadliest sins, greed and pride. Once one is in power, one does not want to let go, and you will do whatever to maintain yourself in that place. For those people, it was basically sacrifice so that they could keep themselves in control as well. So, as sophisticated a civilization as the Aztecs were, unfortunately, they were also a millennia or more behind in their belief systems, in their religion, which is simply too archaic and too primal for their own good. And that also caused the demise of the Aztec Empire as we know it. So we have certain elements working here together. Religion working with politics or so and people, but also personally we have greed, domination, and control, and you lose your soul. You lose a part of your spirit, and you do not even realize it. Because everything is about dominance and justifying that things have to be so, because this is the way we keep our civilization, our people together, we keep control, but that's the key. It's really keeping control. It's not so much about doing what is best after all for the nation, for the people, for the civilization. But it becomes blinded, that is so. Perhaps some of them are fooling themselves into believing this. The more, let's say, narcissistic ones basically don't care anymore. They lose a part of their spirit. And in a way we can say that that's what happened here, as well with the Aztec Empire and their civilization. Through the use of their spiritualities, which was so great and so powerful, they assisted in destroying themselves without fully realizing it. Along, of course, with the other elements that I mentioned as well, the external sources of the Spaniards coming in, the conquistadors, Cortés, the illness, the biological factors as well, the illnesses that came upon them because of those external people coming in. Those three main factors, among others, brought these people to an end. All that glory, all those riches, all those wonders, their beliefs, they were extraordinary, they were spectacular, they were incredible people, and still are. We still have descendants of those individuals. And we have a lot, to be thankful for their history and the richness of their culture. But we also have to learn as well that, too much of an excess and too much belief in something, and whatever that may be, can ultimately be your destruction. We have seen that over and over and over again with different societies, different time periods, different peoples throughout history. And unfortunately, history has a very bad habit, as we are all seeing and knowing, of repeating itself. We have to learn to put a stop to that once and for all. How? I wonder. But I bring those elements together to teach also about spirituality here. And the Aztecs were a perfect example of that. And part of the theme here for this evening is about, excess in belief, excess in spirituality. It is excellent and good to have a belief and to practice and to follow through. It has helped people, it has helped save lives, it has helped to improve people in all aspects of their lives. Devotion is beautiful. I do it as well. But when it becomes excessive or fanatical, and we can call what the Aztecs were, to a great degree, fanaticism, even though that may not have existed at that time. Maybe that term was not even in existence for any peoples at that time. It was a different era, a different place, a different world. But now, as we look back and see upon it, that was fanatical. It was obsessive. We can even call it to a certain point, it was a disease. To go to that extent in a belief that you will sacrifice thousands to maintain a belief system. That is not so. No matter how devoted you were, no matter how pious you may be, I am quite sure those hundreds of years ago, in the 14th through 16th century, and perhaps even further back, not all those people that lived at that time in that place were so devoted and so believing in this. I'm sure that many suffered because of that, seeing their loved ones, perish in such a way. Many died not wanting to, but it was part of their belief, part of their civilization. But they had to go to it. They were forced into it. They couldn't go back. Again, this was a different mindset and different way of being and living. But I am quite sure those people had feelings and had emotions. People have changed in the last hundreds of few years or thousands of years or so, but the basic core, to a great degree, is still the same. For thousands and hundreds of thousands of years, as long as humans have been and existed. And still are, and as they keep evolving, there's still the core value of emotion, thought, knowing. Some people may be more evolved mentally than others and know more. That's how we can break through things and grow and become more sophisticated and advanced as a civilization. But still, there were those back then, I am certain, that were not in agreement to all of these things, and they had to suffer and pay the price for that, because they were outnumbered. It was simply too much to come against. So even to this day, and we've seen the examples as well, even to modern day era, about certain people, certain factions that have these incredible belief systems that seem to be beyond logic and reason to a great extent. It is true, one has to have faith. And faith has carried and done miracles. But when it goes to a point where it becomes harmful and detrimental to the self and to others, is that really so? Is that really true faith? And to go to the extent where you would sacrifice yourself or become ill. Because some of these beliefs sometimes have driven people to insanity or to great mental illness. We have to be aware of that too. And it can take a long time for them to come back from that, if ever. And many people have given themselves over and have sacrificed themselves, even to more modern day era. Look at the Jim Jones situation, there in South America. That wasn't that long ago. Those people poisoned themselves with whatever toxin that they took, and how many hundreds of people died because of that, because of that belief system or so. The other one, the David Koresh in Texas, with his beliefs or so. And look what happened there with the fire, that ranch or so. How many people died because of that belief system? Some innocent, some not, because they went along with it. Because of a belief and a ritual or so that went beyond, with someone who thought something that wasn't really so, and it ultimately caused harm instead of healing. And here we see it to a great degree with the peoples of the Mesoamerican period. In a way, it was a different period and a different time. Belief systems of that sort was partially responsible for them no longer being able to retain their incredible empire and what they built. In part, because even with the Spanish and with the overcoming whatever, they still could have been, diminished anyway. Different people, they had more knowledge, more awareness of things to a certain degree. But who's to say? Wonders have happened also. But having faith that is misbegotten and illogical, is not the way to go. So I always let people know that yes, you must have faith and belief, but you also must be real. And it's about healing and not get carried away with devotions. You can't get to the point where your whole life is dictated to your belief systems and what you must do. And you say this prayer every day at this time period exactly, or else something bad will happen. I won't be protected as I should be. I need to do this ritual exactly this way or whatever, to such an extent that it becomes obsessive. It's good to be devotional. Yes, you have to do certain things in a certain way. Absolutely. Or so. But when it starts to overtake your life and your mind, that is not really what spirit and healing is all about. It is for the well-being of the individual and retaining your free will and self-expression and your freedom to do other things and to be a full and complete person, not a complete devotional to one thing and then that's it. Look, we have people of the clergy or so who are very devoted, who have dedicated their lives or so, but at the same time, they go out and they have a good time too. They have other interests and other things. They play sports. They sing. They have music. They enjoy their family and friends. They go out. And they do things. They are part of the world as well. They enjoy that aspect of themselves. They don't sacrifice that, of themselves, either. And they're healthy and well and happy. And yes, they're devoted to their particular belief, religions or so, whatever. That is their vocation. That is their job. That is what they do. But they also live a full life. It isn't just completely engulfed in that one area only for themselves. So we have to be full and complete and enjoy ourselves as we are. Other interests. The world is too vast and has too much to offer to just cut off one area because, oh, this is wrong, this is bad, this is so whatever. Not at all. Yes, there are certain things that, of course, are not right and that are illegal and that are negative and that are harmful. That is not to be, done or to be, okay, well, I understand or whatever to a certain extent, but not to a point where it's going to be detrimental to others and cause harm and to yourself. We are here to enjoy the full experience of things, not just one aspect. And we can still be devoted and spiritual. And higher power will love us for that. That is what it is meant to be. So this is a cautionary tale about spirit and how to believe and how to be pure and good and light. It is about helping others. It is about being happiness. It is about devotion. It is about helping others attain their own self-empowerment and their own connection that is healthy and beautiful. That is what true spirituality is about. And believe in your way, but believe where it is in the good. And that's how we can be a complete and happy and blessed group of people. So that's what we can learn from all of this. And that is what we want to espouse, to promote to others as they continue to seek and find or open up, to their spirit and to their spirituality, and how they too can achieve a full, happy, and blessed life. So we'll leave it at that. So now, that was fascinating and different for you, wasn't it? It was different for me, certainly, too. But as I promised, we're going to do a little bit of a brief ancient meditation, which goes along with what we've been doing this evening. I'm running a little late, but this was quite fascinating and interesting. So we'll run a little bit longer, and we'll do an ancient meditation and maybe 2 or 3 readings as well along the way for those who are still out there, who are listening to me, or and see what we can connect with spirit through that. Okay. So as usual, those of you who are still with me here, please, make yourselves comfortable as usual. And both feet on the ground, hands on your lap. And do your 3 deep cleansing breaths as always, to get yourself into a calm, relaxed state of being. And we will begin. 1, 2, 3. Envision yourself in a beautiful plaza. It is daylight, a beautiful warm summer day, close to noon. Before you, you stand upon a long, large table. You climb up the stairs to this altar. It is made of marble. Stand upon this altar. Before you is a plaza. To the left and to the right, there are statues, 10 feet apart from one another going back. These statues depict jaguars, parrots, ocelots, alligators, fish, different animals from the region are depicted on these statues as they go back. In the middle is green grass, beautifully taken care of, meticulously taken care of, very, very green. You stand on the altar. Behind you, when you look back, there's a beautiful temple with many stairs going upwards to the top as a pyramid. At the top of that pyramid, there is a small temple. Silence, beauty everywhere. You can hear some of the animals of the jungle. Some of the birds are singing. Some of the monkeys chattering softly. Moving forward again, you gaze upon the plaza. Suddenly, the sun descends from the sky and comes down towards the center of the plaza, this ball of light. Look into the ball of light. Its light is dazzling. It's absolutely bright white. And it fills the plaza in this light. Gaze into the ball of light. The light is bright but will not harm your vision. As the bright light envelopes you, standing on this altar, be bathed in this white light. Feel how powerful and gentle it is. It bathes you in its warmth, in its brightness, from head to toe. Feel the healing that it brings from your head all the way down to your feet. Feel the release of all illness, all hostility, all sickness, all sorrow, all pain that you may be carrying, all worries, anxieties. Feel this light heal you of all of these elements inside of you. Feel as they dissolve with the warmth of this bright light. Take a moment to enjoy this release and this light. The white light now starts to recede in from you. But in the course of being bathed in this light, was there a message? Was there a vision? Was there a feeling that came over you that gave you something, that provided some encouragement, some healing for you? Keep that with yourself for now. The light recedes back to the plaza. The ball of light lifts back into the sky and back as the sun. You stand there refreshed, light, and clear. Now close your eyes again if they haven't been open, and bring yourselves back here to where we are. So again, we're going to breathe in 1, 2, 3. And slowly bring yourselves back. You can open your eyes, move your hands, move your arms, your feet a bit, just to become grounded again more in our present state. Feeling refreshed, light, and well. If you had a vision, if someone came to visit you during this experience, if you received a message, a sound, a feeling that is positive or even if it's something that's negative, it is something that you can learn from. See it, learn it, take it with you. That is to help you, ultimately, positive or negative. The negative teaches. Remember that. That was part of the theme for this evening. From something negative, what can we learn from it to be positive? How that can help you resolve a problem, an issue, a concern, no matter how long ago it was or how current, or even something projecting in the future. See what you can do to alleviate that, to heal that, to deal with it, to make it better, for you and for your future. So brings yourself back. So we'll stay a little bit longer. So if anyone has any questions for a spot reading or two, I'll give it a little more time here. It was a long one this evening, wasn't it? That lecture went on a little bit longer than I thought. But it was important, it was interesting. I hope you all did gain something from it. And if anyone has a question, now's the time. I'll be ending in about 4 minutes, because we've gone on for 2 hours at this point, almost. So that's enough time. But in the meantime, we'll have our next program, and I will tell you that that will be a special program in a different way, okay? So I'm not going to give away anything, so you'll have to see, the announcement as I make it over the weekend, okay? But it will be different from this. It won't be as heavy or as academically oriented or so, but you're welcome. You're welcome, Pietro. I'm glad you enjoyed the meditation. I hope it does help you and make you present, and clear, as I do for all of you. But it will not be, a heavy academically oriented, program like tonight's was. That'll be freer, lighter. I know what I'm planning to do there, okay? So it will be a surprise. You'll find out in a day or two. So get ready for that one. I hope you can join me. And see another few minutes or so. If anyone has a burning question, something they want to know from Spirit. If not, we'll call it to a conclusion at 10 exactly. Because for some of you, I'm sure you may have other things that you want to do, or some program or movie you want to see. I know I have something, 1 or 2 things I want to do as well. And let's see. Interesting question. I do believe that what, tonight's program was about has a lot to do in regard to answering that reading, that question for you. And just listen to the words and take it to heart and see how that can be of assistance in lightening you. The ancients had a lot of knowledge or so, and even the gods of the ancient Mexica, the Aztec, had a lot to offer in regards to devotion, in regards to assistance and help. It wasn't the gods that were the problem, it was the people and how they were interpreting the help from the gods. That was the problem there, at least as I see it. If they would have been more clearer in their view of what their belief and their devotion to their gods would be, and what their gods actually really wanted, not so much wanted for them, but would have asked, for them, the gods could have perhaps even been even greater help, for them than they were. Their gods were a protective, group, and they did protect the Aztec people for a long time, but they couldn't interfere with their free will either, because that goes even higher. But they did what they could, and that's why the Aztecs lasted as long as they did. But they could have lasted longer if they would have been a little bit more advanced and more open to what, and more knowing of what true spirituality is about. So take those words with you and apply that to yourself in your life and what you believe and what you do, and see how that can benefit you. So we have another minute or so before we go. Do enjoy this weekend, everyone. I understand it's going to be sizzling. It's going to be really hot. So that should be special. I myself may actually go to the beach. I'm going to see if I can, trek that one out. So I'll go either very early or very late. I'm, very aware of, things. I don't want to be around too many people. So I'd rather do it super, super early before a bunch of crowd comes in, or really, really late. After. Luckily, we have daylight going on till 8 o'clock practically. So as long as there's not a bunch of people out there, I can keep to myself. I may just go to the beach. I love the ocean, as those of you who know me know. I love the beach. I love the ocean. I want to be there. I want to see it. I want to devote, there and enjoy the sunlight. Say a little prayer to the ocean gods over there also, and heal. It's about healing and relaxation as well, and sunlight and fun, also too. But I don't want to get around too many new people right now, too close. Not a good thing. So I'll see what I can work out. Hopefully this week or so. This week, I'll see what I can do. But I plan to get out there. And that'll be a good thing there. And yes, absolutely, for sure. And so we'll see. I'll let you know what I accomplish, next week. And it's about keeping healthy, happy, and wonderful. So on that note, there are no more questions or so. So for those of you who are out there, thank you for joining me for this. This program, as always, is archived on my page, The Angelis Colon Transpsychic Express. For those of you who are new out there, please click into my page, look into it. You can see a repeat of this program and the other broadcasts that I've done as well very easily. You can go into the videos section of the page, and the majority of these programs are there on various subjects and topics as well. And so if you like, you can also click and join my page, too. I always appreciate it greatly. I put a lot of interesting and fascinating information there that you can learn from. It's not all about me. There's other things there too that you can look into and see, and perhaps expand upon on your own. You can do your own research, your own internet, studies, and learn more, from there. All right? So I appreciate that. I appreciate you as always. Thank you for being here. And I wish you a wonderful hot weekend. It'll be in the 90s or so. Maybe it'll get to 100, which will be fabulous. I love it. It's so rare for New York. 100 or more, even better. You may think I'm out of my mind, but I just love it. I'm a child of the light. I'm a child of the sun. And I will see you then next week. Good luck, blessings, lots of love. You all take care. Good night, everyone. Blessings.